Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, we've got a gripping story that dives deep into the complexities of marriage, betrayal, and revenge. In this tale, we follow Greg, a man whose seemingly perfect life takes a sharp turn when his wife, Bethany, drops a bombshell. But Greg isn't just any man. He's got a plan to take control and turn the tables. Get ready for a roller coaster of emotions as we unravel this story of love, loss, and ultimate redemption. Stick around, you won't want to miss this one. It was a Monday morning, and Greg was sitting at the kitchen table in their McMansion, sipping his coffee and reading the sports page. He'd already finished his breakfast, but Bethany was still there. "Would you put the paper down, Greg?" she asked. "I need to talk to you." Greg set the paper down. "What's up?" "I'm leaving you, Greg. I want a divorce." "Is that all?" Greg picked the paper back up, acting unconcerned. "I'm serious, Greg." Bethany's voice was tight. He ignored her, and she practically exploded. "Damn it, Greg, put the damn paper down and talk to me." Greg finally met her gaze. "Why? I've got nothing to say except goodbye. It isn't any great loss. You haven't exactly been wife of the year lately. So go." Bethany glared at him. "Fine," she spat. "Just give me a second." She stormed off, leaving Greg to finish his coffee. He wasn't as unaffected as he was pretending to be. In fact, he had a plan. Greg went into his home office, grabbed a pad and pen, and scribbled a note. "Todd, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank God she's gone." He almost put the note in an envelope, then stopped. He grabbed his wallet, took out a lottery ticket he'd bought the night before, and tucked it inside. Greg added to the note, "Maybe if you get lucky and win, it'll be enough to keep the cheating witch satisfied, and she won't go out and cheat again. Good luck, dude, you're gonna need it." He signed it, a very thankful Greg, and put it in the envelope. Then he went back to find Bethany, tossing the envelope on the table. "When you see Todd, give him this." Bethany looked shocked. "You know, just because you think I'm clueless doesn't make it so." Greg snatched the envelope back. "On second thought, I'll mail it. I don't trust you not to open it up, read it, then throw it away. Now, how about you pack your stuff and get the hell out of my life? You're the one who wants to leave. You get out of the house ASAP." "I'm sure not leaving. No way am I getting out just so you can move your lover in." Greg ignored her. He poured his coffee into a travel mug, grabbed his briefcase, and headed out the door for work. On his way to the office park, Greg stopped at their local First National Bank branch. He closed out their joint savings and checking accounts, making sure to clean out their safe deposit box, too. Then he drove to a different bank closer to work and set up new accounts in his name only. First things first. Once he got to his office, Greg called to cancel all their joint credit cards and applied for new ones just in his name. With that taken care of, he dove into his work, trying to ignore the turmoil at home. After work, he met Sierra, his executive assistant, for dinner and drinks at their usual after-work spot. "So, just saying, I'm back on the market. Any chance your sister is still interested?" Sierra laughed. "To hell with my sister. If you're back in circulation, I want to be first in line." Greg was surprised. Sierra had started as his secretary 10 years ago, and she'd been so good at her job that he'd promoted her to his personal assistant a few years later. She'd gotten so good he'd practically made up the executive assistant title just to give her another raise. He remembered the company barbecue he'd thrown a couple of summers ago. Sierra had mentioned her sister, Trista, was visiting, and Greg had told her to bring her along. Trista was a bombshell, blonde and buxom. The next day, Sierra had joked that her sister had the hots for Greg. He'd laughed it off, knowing Bethany could get insanely jealous, and she had been, plenty of times, even when there was nothing to be jealous of. Now here was Sierra, telling him she was interested. He'd never considered it before, but... "Okay, then," Greg said, trying to sound casual. "Trista moves to second place, and you take the top spot." "I'm not joking, Greg. I'm serious. I want a shot." "You might not, once you hear what I have to offer." "And what's that?" "Well, Bethany told me she wants a divorce. So, I'm leaving it to her and her lover boy to make it happen. I have no clue what their timetable is. Her lover? You mean? She hooked up with this guy about a year and a half ago. I guess a couple nights a week with him wasn't enough anymore. She's going full-time. How long have you known? About a year and a half. Almost since it started. How could you know that? A friend of mine saw Bethany going into a motel room with some guy and called me. I hired a Pi to follow her for a week. He got me everything I needed to know. A year and a half? And you didn't do anything about it? Sierra was incredulous. What was there to do? Get all bent out of shape and turn my life upside down? This state's no fault. Everything gets split 50-50. I'd have to sell the McMansion, give up the pool, the hot tub, my workshop, the 3-car garage. I'd be stuck in some crummy apartment. No, thank you. I decided to just ignore it, let her keep cooking, doing laundry, cleaning. How could you stand being around her, knowing she was cheating on you? You'd be surprised how fast love turns to hate, then hate to just nothingness. Indifference. He took a swig of his beer. I still can't believe a guy like you could go a year and a half without sex. Greg shrugged. Didn't have to. As long as Bethany was still offering, I wasn't complaining. The frequency dropped off a bit, I'll give you that. And I wouldn't touch her on the days I knew she'd been with him, obviously. But other than that, the only change was that I stopped calling it making love and started calling it what it was, sex. Do you have any idea why she did it? Not a clue, but he probably wasn't the first. You think she's had another? I have no way of knowing for sure. But in the 10 years we were married, she went through these moods. 4 times, at least, that I can remember. Acted exactly the same way she's been acting since she got with this Todd guy. It's just a hunch, but I'd bet those other times weren't so innocent either. If I hadn't been tipped off about this one. He shook his head. I probably would have just brushed it off as another one of her female things. Maybe I'm totally off base, but at this point, it doesn't matter. I know about this one, and that's all I need. So what are you going to do now? Wait? Wait for what? See what she does. She wants a divorce? Fine, she can get one. But she's on her own now. I cleaned out our bank accounts this morning, canceled her credit cards, told her to get out. Greg, she doesn't make enough to support herself and pay a lawyer. She'll have to hit up Loverboy for the money. What if he doesn't go for it? I'm sure they talked it over before she sprung this on me. But you're right. I have no way of knowing. What I'm saying is, if you're serious about us, you'd be getting involved with a married guy who has no idea how long it'll be before he's actually divorced. You're not thinking straight, Sierra. How so? If she files for divorce, she controls everything. You get served with papers, and things could get ugly. She could get the house, make you pay her legal fees. What if she claims mental cruelty, gets a restraining order against you? Sierra's eyes widened. Greg could tell she hadn't thought of that. He went on. You're always telling me I need to be setting the pace, be in the driver's seat. Make her react to me, not the other way around. But, how does filing for divorce help us? If we wait for her, and she decides not to file? What if Newman won't cough up the money? We start dating, and boom, we're committing adultery. She can use that against me. She cheated, so what? I did too, right? But if I file, I'm saying the marriage is over. What I do after that is none of her business. But, legally. Okay, technically, we'd still be married until the divorce is final. But no judge is gonna care about a little adultery if it happened after we separated. Look, from where I'm sitting, you need to stay far, far away from me until either I file for divorce or Bethany does. If we wait on her, it could be years, Greg. Or it could be next week, who knows? But if you do it, it could be as soon as this weekend. If I can see a lawyer tomorrow, I could have her served by Thursday. That'd give me the weekend to work on hooking up with you. Hooking up with you, huh? Damn straight, boss man. What good's being first in line if you don't take advantage? Sierra was right, and they both knew it. Greg pulled out his cell and speed-dialed Jason. Jason? Greg, listen, I need a lawyer. Greg and Jason had been friends since the 3rd grade. Now Jason was a lawyer, specializing in family law, the polite term for divorce law. Man, I'm sorry to hear that. Sally and I both really like Bethany. Yeah, well, anyway, can you take this on? Greg gave Jason the rundown on Bethany's ultimatum and his plan to file first. Sure, man, I can get started first thing in the morning. Swing by around lunchtime. We can grab some takeout. You can sign the papers, we'll figure out the details. Greg hesitated. Actually, I kinda want to get a restraining order against her, too. A restraining order? What happened? Greg made up a story about Bethany threatening him, saying she'd sick Todd on him if he didn't make things easy for her. Jason laughed. Okay, dude, I know that's BS, but sure, I can file for it. You know there'll be a hearing within 10 days, right? I can get the order served, but the judge has to approve it if you want it to stick around. Yeah, I know. I'll be ready. The important thing is getting her out of the house and keeping her out. We don't have kids, so there's no reason for her to even set foot in here until the divorce is finalized. I'm figuring possession is 9/10 of the law here. No way the judge is gonna make me leave and let her move back in. That's the plan, anyway. Smart. You told her to get out, right? This morning, but who knows what I'll find when I get home. She might be gone, or she might still be there. Just serve the papers at her work. No chance of you two working things out, then. Not a prayer. See you tomorrow. Greg hung up and turned back to Sierra with a grin. So, what are you thinking about this weekend? Sierra outlined her plans, and Greg was impressed. He'd been right to take a chance with her. But when he got home that evening, his good mood vanished. Bethany was in the kitchen, sorting through a stack of papers. Why are you still here? Greg asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. It's my house, too. I'm staying until I find another place. If you don't like it, you move out. Let your little girlfriend move in. Not a chance in hell. We need to talk about how we're gonna do this. Oh, we're not doing anything. I'll do what I need to do, and I don't give a rat's ass what you want. Bethany, there are things that have to be worked out. No, there aren't. You want a divorce? Go hire a lawyer, file the paperwork, and pay for it yourself. Because I'm going to fight you tooth and nail for every single thing we own. This is a no-fault state. We split everything right down the middle. I'm gonna make sure your lawyer earns every penny you pay him, too. They don't work for free, you know. Greg gestured toward the furniture. You want the coffee table? Too bad, so do I. That sofa? Nope, it has sentimental value, and I'm keeping it. Why? You don't care about any of this stuff. You weren't even emotional when I told you I wanted a divorce. You just told me to pack and get out. That was before. Greg paused, took a breath. He decided to take a chance. That was before I had time to think. Look, I let you get away with it the first 3 times, Bethany. You stayed, we moved on. I thought I was doing the right thing. You came back to me, so? Bethany's eyes darted away from him. The fact that she didn't deny it confirmed everything Greg had suspected. I don't know why I kept forgiving you, but I did. I thought maybe it was my fault, something I did to piss you off. Every time you ended it, you came back, and I thought you'd finally realized you loved me. I thought this thing with Newman was the same, but... Greg's voice cracked. Now I realize, you're just a. He couldn't even say it. He glanced down. The beer he'd set on the floor had started to overflow. I thought this thing with Newman was more of the same, that you'd get tired of him eventually. But I was wrong. You're just a cheat. If it wasn't him, it'd be some other guy 6 months from now. The anger was rising inside him, hot and fierce. I want to take a belt to you. Give you something to really cry about. He knew he couldn't. Assaulting Bethany would land him in jail, and it wouldn't solve anything. The only thing I can do is make this divorce as painful and expensive as possible. He sighed. You're right, it's your house too. And I'm not gonna drag you out of here and risk getting arrested for domestic violence. So, you can stay. But we're done. Don't talk to me, don't look at me. Go pick one of the spare bedrooms and stay the hell out of my sight. Greg finished his beer and headed upstairs to what used to be their bedroom. He got ready for bed, thinking about Jason and the restraining order. He'd given Bethany plenty to think about, plenty to discuss with Newman. And that would buy Jason some time to get the order signed and served before she could lawyer up. Unless she's already done that. He pushed the thought away. He'd checked their account balances that morning, and nothing seemed off. If Bethany had hired a lawyer, she wouldn't have used their money. Newman must be paying for it. Greg was up before dawn. He left the house without seeing Bethany, grabbing a quick breakfast at the busy Bee Diner. As Andrea poured him a coffee refill, he started a mental list of everyone he needed to call once Bethany was served. He wasn't going to let her spin some tale about him being the bad guy. Everyone would know exactly why they were getting divorced. At the office, Sierra greeted him with a suggestive smile. "I'm really looking forward to the weekend," she said. Greg returned the smile, his hope growing. "Me too," he said, and he meant it. Greg met Jason for lunch, signing the divorce papers without hesitation. "So, I still want those papers served at her work?" Jason asked, tucking the documents into his briefcase. "Damn straight. Figure tomorrow, around 10? Call me the second it's done. I want the locks changed before she can get home." "Got it. I'll call the locksmith too, let them know someone. I'll be there to let them in." Greg went back to the office, buzzing with nervous energy. He told his boss he needed to take a personal day, then called a local locksmith, paying extra for a rush job the next morning. It felt good to be taking control. When he got home that night, Bethany's car was in the driveway, but she kept to herself. He didn't see her all evening. The next morning, he left early again, stopping for coffee at the busy Bee. "Morning, Greg. Where's Bethany? Haven't seen her 2 days in a row now." Andrea, the owner, gave him a knowing look. "You won't be seeing us together anymore, Andrea. We're splitting up." "Do tell," she said, her eyebrows raised as she took his order. When she came back with his check, she leaned in conspiratorially. "My number's on the back. And not the diner's number, my number." He couldn't help but chuckle as she walked away. 2 women in 2 days, huh? What was it about married guys? Or maybe it was just that Bethany had made him invisible for so long. Greg checked his watch, waiting until it was time for Bethany to leave for work. Then he drove back to the McMansion and started moving her things out to the garage. He was just finishing up when Jason called. "Papers have been served." She didn't seem too happy about it. Greg grinned. "I bet. Locksmith should be there any minute." Sure enough, 20 minutes later, the locksmith was replacing all the locks on the house. Greg even had him change the code on the garage door opener. He'd just finished taping a big sign on the garage door, "All your things are in here. Bethany," when Bethany's car screeched into the driveway. She got out and stared at the sign, her face a mask of fury. She tried the front door, of course, but the keys wouldn't turn. Then she rang the doorbell over and over, but Greg just watched through the peephole, not answering. Finally, defeated, she stormed out to the garage and grabbed a couple of bags, then left again. 2 minutes later, his phone rang. He already knew who it was. "You asshole. You had to humiliate me in front of my entire office? Better than humiliating me with my friends and family, don't you think? Besides, you're the one who wanted a divorce. What's the problem? The restraining order. Gee, wonder why I'd want one of those. That's a crock and you know it. I need to get in the house and get my things. They're all in the garage, Bethany. I didn't change the garage door code." "Stop screwing around, Greg. You're making this way harder than it has to be. Causing you a little inconvenience doesn't even begin to make up for years of you screwing around behind my back. But hey, it's a start. Be thankful I didn't get violent. Goodbye, Bethany." He hung up and immediately started making his calls. Jason, his family, their friends. Most of them were shocked, but a couple weren't surprised at all. "Finally figured it out, huh?" one had said. Another had been even more blunt. "Honestly, I always figured you two had one of those open marriages. Bethany was always running off with some guy, and you never said a word." Greg figured he could cross those last 2 people off his list of friends. The news hit Bethany's parents the hardest. They'd always treated Greg like the son they never had, and he hated that this would hurt them. But he refused to let Bethany twist the story, make it seem like it was all his fault. He knew how this worked. If he didn't control the narrative, they'd end up siding with their daughter, and Greg couldn't stomach that. Once the calls were done, Greg did one last sweep of the house, gathering up the rest of Bethany's things. He made himself a sandwich, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. It wasn't just hunger, it was the hollowness of betrayal. The guys from Apex Security showed up just as he was finishing his lunch. Greg didn't trust Bethany for a second. He knew she'd try to break in, restraining order or not. He was having a complete security system installed, cameras, motion detectors, the works. With the security team working on the house, Greg headed out to his workshop. He was itching to get some work done, to lose himself in something familiar. Should he get started on the bookshelf he'd been planning? Or maybe spend some time on the '34 Ford coupe he was restoring? Ford won. Some things were just too good to resist. On Thursday, he stopped by Sierra's desk at the office, excitement bubbling inside him. "We're good to go for this weekend." She beamed. "Tomorrow night, then? Dinner and dancing?" Greg couldn't help but grin. But when he got home that evening, his anticipation turned to ice-cold fury. Bethany had used the garage door opener to get inside, then broken in through the connecting door. The kitchen was trashed, broken dishes and glasses everywhere. She'd even smashed a couple of lamps in the living room. And the cameras had captured everything. He watched the footage, a cold smile spreading across his face. The best part was when Bethany went into Greg's closet, pulled all his clothes off the racks, dumped them in a heap, and, well, let's just say she'd made her feelings quite clear. "All on tape, you crazy bitch." It wasn't just that she'd violated the restraining order, she'd been deliberately destructive. Malicious. Greg was pretty sure this little temper tantrum just landed her in jail. Greg immediately called Jason, who in turn called the police. The officers took a report and snapped photos of the damage. The next morning, 2 officers walked into Bethany's office and hauled her away in handcuffs. Greg had to hand it to her. She looked genuinely shocked. She was booked, fingerprinted, photographed, and brought before a judge, all before lunchtime. Bethany was charged with violating a restraining order and willful destruction of property. She was released on her own recognizance, with a hearing scheduled for the following week. Greg was surprised they'd even let her out. He'd been hoping for at least a night or 2 in jail, just to let things sink in. That evening, he picked Sierra up for their date. They went to their favorite Italian restaurant, then hit a jazz club downtown. He'd forgotten how good it felt to laugh, to flirt, to enjoy the company of a beautiful woman who actually seemed to like him. They made plans for another date that Saturday. That one went well, too, and they ended up having a picnic at the park on Sunday. Monday morning came too soon. Greg sat in the courtroom, his stomach churning as Bethany was brought in. He and Jason had brought the security footage. The judge's expression turned thunderous as he watched Bethany's rampage. He didn't just uphold the restraining order, he made it permanent. "Ms. Jones, I am ordering you to pay restitution for all damages. That includes replacing every item you broke, paying for the dry cleaning of Mr. Thompson's clothes, and hiring professional cleaners to deal with the contamination in the bedroom. You have 10 days to provide proof of payment. Otherwise, you will be held in contempt of court. Do I make myself clear?" Just to rub salt in the wound, Greg hired the most expensive cleaning service he could find. To his disappointment, Bethany actually came up with the money. Newman must have come through for her, after all. He'd been looking forward to the satisfaction of seeing Bethany hauled off to jail. Oh well. The next 2 weeks flew by in a blur of dates with Sierra. They were taking things slowly, mostly just dinners and movies, lots of kissing, some of it pretty intense. Neither of them felt comfortable going further, not while Greg was technically still married. But it was clear they were both falling hard and fast. Bethany didn't contest the divorce. 6 months after that fateful Monday morning, their marriage was officially over. It was the standard, no-fault deal. Assets split right down the middle. Greg refinanced the house, buying out Bethany's half. He made out like a bandit, thanks to the money he'd been squirreling away in a separate account for years, originally meant for a surprise around-the-world trip for their 20th anniversary. Well, Bethany wouldn't be seeing a dime of that. He hadn't told her about the last 2 CDs he'd stashed in their safe deposit box, either. Those bonus checks had come in handy, after all. He did have to pay Bethany alimony, but Jason had managed to get it knocked down to a measly $100 a week, instead of the $500 she'd been gunning for. Pure luck, man, Jason had told him. The judge who handled your restraining order, the one who's overseeing the divorce, turns out they're cousins. And apparently they both have ex-wives who cheated on them. Greg just shook his head. Sometimes, karma really did come around. Neither one of those judges believed in punishing the guy when it's the woman who strays, Jason had said with a shrug. They followed the letter of the law, but that's it. Whatever Bethany had with Newman clearly hadn't been all that serious, because 7 months after the divorce was finalized, she'd moved back in with her parents. 8 months after that fateful day in court, Greg was sitting at the bar in the Marriott, enjoying a steak sandwich and a beer. It had been a long day at the office, but he was in a good mood. Sierra was coming over later, and he was really starting to fall for her. Suddenly, someone sat down on the stool next to him. "Buy you a beer?" the guy asked. Greg looked over. It was Todd Newman. "Mind if I join you?" Newman asked, gesturing to the empty stool. Greg was curious. "Sure, go ahead." Newman waved to Darlene, the bartender, and ordered them both beers. He took a long swig of his, then set it down and stared at it for a long moment, peeling the label off the bottle. "I didn't mean to screw you over, Greg." Greg raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to go on. "She wasn't wearing her wedding ring that first night. I met her at Bud's, you know, that sports bar downtown? She was there with some coworkers. I asked her to dance, and, well, one thing led to another." Newman shrugged, avoiding Greg's gaze. "She definitely didn't act married." "So you asked her out, and she said yes?" "Yeah, I fell for her hard and fast. We started seeing each other whenever we could. I had roommates back then, and couldn't even bring her back to my place. And Bethany said she was living with her sick mother, so you had to sneak around motel rooms." "It was rough, man. I finally got my own place, figured things would get easier. And I was crazy about her, Greg. Head over heels. I was even thinking about proposing. I was actually looking at houses. You know, something with enough space for us and her mother. Then this buddy of mine, he asked me why I was messing around with a cheater. I was about to kick his ass, but he told me Bethany was married, that she'd pulled this before, with his brother of all people. Seems like she'd done the same thing a couple of years back, but he dumped her when he found out she was married. I still didn't want to believe it, even after I got your letter. I sat on it for a week, trying to figure out if you were just screwing with me. Finally, I confronted her. And she broke down. Started crying, saying she didn't love you, that you were a mean drunk, that you beat her. By then, I'd done some digging of my own, and knew she was full of it. Any thoughts of marrying her went right out the window. But, he shrugged, she's good in bed, and you'd already kicked her out. I figured, what the hell? She can stay with me as long as she's, you know. Once the divorce was final, though, she started talking about marriage again. I shut that down right away. My own mom cheated on my dad, 3 husbands in a row. Once a cheater, always a cheater, you know? I told Bethany I was fine with a friends with benefits thing, living together, whatever, but that was it. Newman drained his beer. So, word on the street is, you knew about us all along. How come you didn't do anything? Why didn't you divorce her? Greg laughed. You said it yourself, Newman, she's good in bed. I figured, why rock the boat? I had a steady companion. Plus, someone to cook, clean, and do my laundry. We probably would have gone on like that forever if she hadn't decided she wanted out. Funny thing is, I never thought I'd be saying this, especially not to you, but I miss having her around. He finished his beer, then stood up. He fished something out of his pocket and set it on the bar, sliding it across to Greg. What's this? Greg asked, puzzled. That lottery ticket you gave me. It was a winner. This is your half. Figured I should wait until after the divorce, so you wouldn't have to share it with her. Newman nodded at him, then turned and walked out of the bar. Greg picked up the ticket. It wasn't a ticket, it was a cashier's check, made out to Todd Newman. For a very, very large amount. Back at the office, his assistant, Jean, looked up as Greg walked in. Well, look at you. You look like the cat that ate the canary. Lunch must have been good. Lunch was spectacular, Greg said, still a bit dazed. He went into his office, a slow grin spreading across his face. Sierra wasn't working for him anymore, at least, not at the office. She was home, painting the nursery, getting ready for the twins. And that wraps up today's story. A tale where Greg turns the tables on betrayal and finds a new path forward. It's a powerful reminder that even when life takes unexpected turns, we can take control and find a way to move on. Greg's journey from heartbreak to happiness shows us that with a little patience and a lot of determination, we can build a better future, even after the storm. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales just like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.